This is episode 4 of AR&IO, the Active Research and Informed Opinion Chinese Language course. In this episode, for the first time in the series, I'm going to do some Q&A with you in the audience. I'm going to ask some questions, and you can pause the video and write out an original answer. If you don't want to do that, you can just see the answers I give, and we discuss the grammar and word choice. We're going to be using the same words that we learned in earlier episodes, of course, before we get into too much new vocabulary. If you look at the title of this episode,
不管是不是宣传
不管是不是宣传. One of the significant things here is that I'm not phrasing this in the way I, as a native speaker of English, would naturally tend to phrase it. So this sentence is whether or not it's propaganda. I first wrote this in my own words in Chinese. I expressed it in comprehensible Chinese, the way an English-speaking foreigner would phrase it, and then I Googled around the internet to try to figure out what is the most common way a native speaker of Chinese would say this. And this is one of the ways. I saw this all over the internet. All right? So just say one of the most labor-intensive elements of this series of videos is that I make an effort not to give you artificial textbook Chinese and not to give you my own version of comprehensible outsider's Chinese, but to depict the Chinese language the way Chinese people really say it and use it, so we struggle with and get used to those types of idioms, those types of sentence patterns. So, 不管, translated here as whether or not, but it has a little bit of the sense of notwithstanding in English. You can tell I'm Canadian because I say notwithstanding a lot. Americans don't use the word nearly as often as Canadians do, nor do the British. So the point is here, it's not really asking you a sincere question. Like, the person is not stating this with a tone of sincerely not knowing whether or not something is propaganda. This would be the beginning of a sentence saying something like, well, whether or not what we're reading is propaganda, we can still learn a lot about Chinese culture from it. Whether or not something is propaganda, we can practice the Chinese language, deepen our appreciation of the language, the grammar, so on and so forth. Whether or not this is propaganda, maybe it's really helping us develop a sophisticated attitude towards politics in China in the 21st century. So it's this kind of whether or not. Whether or not it's propaganda, let's make the best of it as a source. So here's an easy question that you could give many different answers to just on the basis of the propaganda we talked about in the last few episodes. 为什么白求恩要选择住在中国？
为什么白求恩要选择住在中国？
We're just getting started with today's lesson, but among the new words we've introduced already, we've seen one of the most important phonetic irregularities in the Pinyin writing system. We've seen it occur twice. Pinyin is famous for its reliability and its predictability in the sense that one symbol corresponds to one sound in a fairly predictable way. However, you might have noticed that this new word,
宣传
here, what we might expect to be an A sound, instead is what a native speaker of English would perceive as an E sound. 宣 sounds like an EN ending.
宣传
Likewise, the very commonly used word 选择 选择. You can compare my voice to my lovely assistant. In either case, this is not what a native speaker would expect to hear with the letter A. It's much closer to what we would expect to hear with the letter E.
选择
So we return to our writing exercise. Let's hear that question one more time.
为什么白求恩要选择住在中国？
Why did Bethune choose to live in China? But including the extra verb yao here shifts the sense of the choice a little bit. It's a little bit more like, why would he have wanted to live in China? Why did he want to live in China? And this is really a sort of simplified way of stating the question. Here on screen briefly now, I Googled around for an example of how a native speaker of Chinese would pose this question to other native speakers of Chinese. This is asking the question in terms of why would Norman Bethune have wanted to leave behind the comforts of Canada in order to live in a strange, difficult, far-off place like China? I'm asking you here to give two answers. Many possible answers would be equally valid. Try to write one answer using the sentence pattern 为的是 that we learned before, and one sentence pattern with 因为 and 所以. There are many possible answers you could offer on the basis of the Chinese propaganda we heard in the last few episodes. Beginning the sentence with 为的是 means that we're now going to state the objective or the purpose that he was working towards.
为的是
So why did Norman Bethune choose to live in China?
为的是参加抗日战争。
为的是参加 tone 1 on both 参加抗日战争
为的是参加抗日战争。
in order to join in the struggle against the Japanese, in order to join in the anti-Japanese war. This verb 参加 is used to mean joining in all kinds of activities, formal and informal, joining in a club, joining in a sports team, but it is specifically used in politics to mean joining one side or the other of an ongoing struggle, including outright war or civil war. Taking a step away from the propaganda version of history for just a moment, we could, of course, give several very different answers reflecting the real life, the real intellectual, emotional, and personal concerns of Norman Bethune.
阿兰称白求恩是一个非常复杂的人。
Alan称白求恩是一个非常复杂的人。Fuza is level 1 vocabulary. Fuza means complicated. Very good word to know. The main word I think here that's confusing for you, still confusing for me, is the verb chung. So the first three words here, Alan chung.
阿兰称
That's just the name Alan. And then this chung is a very confusing verb. Here in context, it means that he called him. So Alan called Bethune. Alan described him as being, right? He called him a very complicated man.
阿兰称白求恩是一个非常复杂的人。
Earlier today, I was listening to chapter 1 of a Chinese language textbook that I've never worked with before. And the author of this textbook was assuring me that Chinese is really a very easy language to learn. I don't know if people imagine you'll sell more textbooks that way. The sentence we're looking at here has two examples of a peculiar way in which Chinese remains a remarkably difficult language to learn, even when you're at the intermediate level, even when you're at the advanced level. So, 他在对待
他在对待
You may be familiar with 对 Dui alone is level 1 vocabulary. You may be familiar with dai. Dai is also level 1 vocabulary. However, you could read this sentence and struggle to understand it, not knowing that when they are combined, 对待 has a unique verbal meaning. This is basically a completely different verb, and you can't guess the meaning, not even if you already know 对 and you already know 待. Even if you've done the memorization, you can still make the mistake, because reading this character by character, you think 他在对, and then we have a separate meaning starting with the next word 待. And no, you have to figure out, even if you're using a dictionary, your dictionary won't help you. If you just look up 对 or you just look up 待, you will not figure this out.
他在对待女人和酒精方面存在缺点。
So these two characters combined form a new word, form a unique verb, 对待, which is something like to cope with. Now, if you look it up in your dictionary, it may or may not say cope, but the reason why I'm using the English verb cope is that it almost always has sort of negative connotations. You're struggling with a problem. You're dealing with something. And, normally we don't say you're dealing with something or coping with something in English if it's a wonderful thing that you enjoy dealing with. Okay? So, 他在对待女人和酒精。
他在对待女人和酒精方面存在缺点。
All right, so whoa. We have another example of exactly the same phenomenon in Chinese. You may already know the word 村 and you may already know the word 在, but if you look them up separately in the dictionary, you won't be able to figure out what this sentence means. You must figure out that when the two words are combined, 存在 is again a unique verb or verbal expression in the Chinese language. So it looks like two separate words, but this 存在 is in fact one word with one meaning, and it is basically a fancy way to say that something exists. You may recognize the 存 from 生存, meaning to survive, so it has meanings related to persisting, continuing, so on and so forth. The example I'm giving you on screen contrasts textbook Chinese, the type of example you're likely to find when looking up 存在 in a dictionary, to the way people use the language in the real world. And if you Google around, you can confirm this hypothesis very easily. 你相信这世上存在鬼魂吗? That's just far too many words for a monosyllabic language. Do you believe that in this world there exist ghosts, right? Are there ghosts? Are ghosts something that really exists in this world? But, it's so much easier to just use verbs in Chinese like 有.
世界上有鬼吗?
That's the way people, in practice, will really use the language. So now we're equipped to completely understand this sentence in full, and then maybe we can give an answer to the question that started this whole discussion. Maybe we can give an answer that will offer a rather less propagandistic perspective on why it was that Norman Bethune left Canada to live in China.
阿兰称白求恩是一个非常复杂的人，他在对待女人和酒精方面存在缺点，脾气也很糟糕。
So, to be polite, we may say, deleterious aspects of his character existed. The word deleterious may seem, tremendously polite and refined in English, but let me tell you something. This is level 2 vocabulary, 缺点, the disadvantages of something, the deleterious aspects of somebody or something. And I mentioned before, it seems that 存在 is a needlessly fancy and abstruse way of saying that something exists, but I suppose it might be more polite than just saying he had disadvantages to his character, to say that there were aspects of his character. This is 方面 aspects that were disadvantageous, such as how he dealt with women and alcohol. Yes, the unspoken witness to history here is his wife and his marriage back in Canada that he left behind. Taking these considerations into account, we might come up with a very different answer to the question. I am not showing off my handwriting here. This is very far from calligraphic, but this is writing very rapidly with two very different pens. My answer. 因为他已经参加西班牙内战 Civil War. 西班牙内战 the Spanish Civil War. Because he had joined in the Spanish Civil War, because he participated in the Spanish Civil War, or you might say, because he took a side in the Spanish Civil War. Therefore, how could he not go to China? Therefore, he had to go to China. This sentence pattern is not sarcastic in tone. It really just emphasizes that something inevitably is going to happen, or that you felt that you had to do something.
因为他已经参加西班牙内战，所以他非去中国不可。
This is a little bit provocative, this answer, but I am suggesting to you that he was a Canadian. He did have a certain kind of comfortable status in Canadian society, but he alienated himself from Canadian society by joining the Communist Party, by fighting in the Spanish Civil War, and of course, the side he fought on in the Spanish Civil War, he lost the war. They lost. So after, when you're in that situation, what are you going to do? Well, maybe he really had no better option than going away to China. Here's a simple answer that some of you might use yourselves in your daily life. If somebody were to ask you, why did you decide to move to China? Or why did you decide to start learning Chinese? 为的是开始新的生活 in order to start a new life.
为的是开始新的生活。
And this phrase is used often enough to describe people who are starting a new life after a divorce, after their marriage has broken apart, and they are, like Norman Bethune, trying to move on. We can practice using 因为 and 所以 as a sentence structure to then make it explicit that he was going to China to start a new life because his marriage had ended in failure.
因为他的婚姻最后还是以失败告终，所以他开始新的生活。
因为他的婚姻最后还是以失败告终，所以他开始新的生活。Well, you can call me sentimental, you can call me optimistic, but whether or not it's propaganda, I do believe that one of the reasons he went to China was to help the sick, the injured, and the poor. And I'm very glad that I didn't end up with a degree in the medical sciences, because I'd probably be tempted to buy an airplane ticket to all kinds of conflicts, civil wars, and disasters all over the world, if there were the possibility for me to really make a positive difference.
为的是救治伤病员。
Most of this vocabulary we've already learned, so you can probably guess at the sense. 病原, right? Do you remember 病原? There's a quiz at the end, I promise.
为的是救治伤病员。
You could pretty much learn 救治伤病员 as one set phrase. It is used very often with this complete set of 5 characters all grouped together. So I'm suggesting to you here, whether or not it's propaganda, I think he went in order to provide treatment to the sick and the wounded.
为的是救治伤病员，不管是不是宣传。
Hey guys, I'm cynical, but I'm not that cynical.